everybody, my name is Chloe Hudson. Thank you for joining me and welcome to World Peace Projects. Today I would like to dive into an interesting observation that I have been making in regard to specific timelines that are being intentionally seeded in to our experiences right now. This is something that we are experiencing on a personal level and also on a collective global scale. But first, I'd like to ask you to pop on over to my website, World Peace Project, sign up and subscribe for my e-newsletter if you're not already receiving this, because I offer channelings and messages, events, and content that you don't get on this platform. I also offer personal sessions, coaching packages, and live events and workshops. So, the timelines that I have been noticing are grief has been waving in, absolutely, as an experience. We are dealing right now with a situation that has come up into the awareness that obviously took way too long to be made public, which is that of the Amazon. We're dealing with fires in Siberia. We're dealing with climate crisis, which is not anything new, but it's escalating, of course. And then woven into these situations on a more personal scale are the endeavors that people are dealing with where their karma is coming up to be cleared. They're releasing timelines that no longer serve them, or at least they've been experiencing an adjunct where they are given the opportunity to switch course, switch trajectory. Now, there are astrologers that can assist you to understand much more proficiently than I exactly what's playing out, which is influencing and catalyzing a lot of these experiences, astrologically speaking. Though we're in a very critical frame of time right now, let's call it the next few weeks, where many of us are laying out and anchoring in another timeline that we are going to be experiencing for a much more long haul. There are bigger time segments that are anchoring in now. We're also coming up to a whole new 12-year cycle. And something that I perceive has been spliced into mass consciousness right now, because it's such a critical time to anchor experiences for a longer time period to come, is this grief challenge. Now, we also have a timeline splicing in, which is also nothing new, though it is being impulsed to be more expansive, is that of cognitive dissonance. And then we have the other timeline that might have a more negative polarity agenda, which is one of deceit, illusion, untruths, and half-truths. Now, something that I would like to point out symbolically as we've been dealing with the collective response and emotional magnitude of many people observing what's happening with the fires right now on a mass scale, is this obviously has activated a huge influx of grief energy. This has activated a lot of our collective karma, and this is also something that is transmutational. There are many different perspectives to look at one scenario, as most of us who study multidimensionality may be aware of. So, not to take away from anything that is important and acute to focus on, though it's simply to understand that it is important and it serves us to interject the awareness that fire is an alchemical transmutational tool. Rising from the ashes, activating the phoenix, which is something that is happening in a big way right now, in addition to the experiences where people are waking up to global issues. People are also being impulsed to experience more grief, and that doesn't necessarily serve. At the same time, there's two paradigms playing out in regard to the grief experience. One paradigm activates the feeling and experiences of grief, both on a collective mass scale and also in people's personal lives. And this can help to purge the shadow body and the karmic patterns, karmic looping, and cycles that we might be playing out with certain players, certain soulmates, certain situations that have come up to be viewed and hopefully put to rest on many levels for a lot of us. And this can help us dig up the muck and the gook of the grief experiences we have been harboring for a very, very long time within our soul matrix. And that's a positive experience when we can embrace this holistically, become aware that we're getting into the dregs, the bottom of the barrel, this muck, and we're digging it out. It's not fun, it's not pretty, and it's not an enjoyable experience, though we have foresight on what it means once we clear this out, how much more we can arise anew, like the lotus coming up from the muck, to expand our beauty and express ourselves and move our trajectory to a much more optimistic, expansive timeline, shutting the doors on events and people and situations that no longer serve us so that we can move forward to open up to more adventurous experiences of curiosity, wonderment, and a life fulfilled, expanding our potential. So this is one way to navigate the grief timeline that's coming up right now. And then, of course, we have an experience where the grief timeline is grabbing hold of people. It's sucking them in, it's seducing them, and it's self-propelling and proliferating as people build momentum and bring their fear and their concern and their passion and their anxiety as it builds and it snowballs forward without any foresight or focus on solution and assisting them out of this experience, which will ultimately become highly suffocating. It brings in an essence and an air of hopelessness and victimization. So this agenda that is being imposed has really built a lot of momentum right now. And as it gets global view and global focus and awareness in a way where the energy and the emotion is activated and alive in people, and people are connecting their energy and matching the grief frequency, the anxiety frequency, the hopelessness frequency, the anger frequency, though they're not necessarily accepting this as an experience that is arising with an opportunity for transmutation. This is feeding a timeline that is not something we want to continue a path on if we desire for a higher global outcome to move forward towards more consciousness, more awareness, and more unity through practical solutions and applications and awarenesses and transparency. Something else that's feeding this grief timeline that's always been in play, though it's important that we look at it because it's a much more passive experience that seems to be always running in the background, is that of cognitive dissonance. So many people are asleep at the wheel. A lot of us know this. A lot of us that are seeking truth and consciousness and awareness are acutely aware that we are surrounded by players in this matrix that are opting out of their awakening conscious process. And hopefully we are helping ourselves to accept that that is their choice, though we know that as a global collective, it is imperative for us to wake up and assist ourselves by starting with our internal knowing and then expanding that out so we can come together as a global community. We can activate consciousness and apply practical solutions to assisting our Earth Mother, our Gaia, our Sophia, what I call Chaitanya, and humanity up out of the peril and the disastrous experiences that we are imposing into our reality. It's a very difficult try for humans to take full responsibility, not only in their personal lives for the situation and the reality that we create as an individual, though also on a global collective scale. It is much easier to sit back and turn a blind eye, because if we were to release our cognitive dissonance and accept what's happening, how it is actually affecting each individual and the grand global scale, and how quickly things are coming to a head, then it would be very painful. We would then activate these timelines of grief and experiences that we would have to muddle through and work through, and ultimately take full responsibility for not only our personal lives, but how we have participated actively in the experience of the collective. This is something that is very difficult, and it is easier for many of us to point fingers, be angry, and access victimization, because ultimately we don't believe on a mass scale that each individual makes a difference. This agenda is a very efficient, highly manipulative, and extremely smart, a very cunning agenda to keep the masses in a state of cognitive dissonance. When the cognitive dissonance starts to rumble, then there is another agenda or timeline overlaid onto that, which is one of grief in this now moment that we're experiencing. Now, of course, we've got this other timeline that's playing out, not so passive, of the negative polarity agendas, the powers of B that are anchoring into the greed matrix, the service to self matrix. They are opting to offer and impose these very specific agendas which seed into the collective to impulse the grief timelines and the cognitive dissonance timelines, things of this nature, so that they can benefit through their very limited scope of feeding their desires. It's important for us to be aware of these timelines, because where we put our energy is what we create. And it is high time for each individual to realize that through and through, your entire experience, from your very personal thoughts, from your past karma, in this life and other soul experiences, and also as a global collective human society, we are responsible for all of it. We have chosen all of it, and none of it is without our influence. Even us simply observing what is happening, passing judgment on it, activating emotions or thoughts is highly influential. And because of the sheer fact that we cannot necessarily see directly how our thoughts create our reality, especially when it is that we're focusing on external situations and events, is one way in which we excuse our responsibility and sit back into whatever level of cognitive dissonance we are choosing to accept at this time. And everyone is a culprit. Even the players that are working the hardest, the most proactively and diligently to activate and wake up the masses in themselves are still navigating in some timeline of the matrix. They are susceptible and influenced to cognitive dissonance, to grief, to service to self, and service to others, just like all of us. We are all influenced by these timelines and agendas, though the difference is It's our decision of how much we're going to allow that influence to impose onto the timeline that we're navigating. Is it going to be in such a way that it blindsides us and throws us straight into a path of grief timeline where now we're headed and snowballing and activating more pain body and we're reawakening pain body without any solution? Or are we going to realize that just because we're influenced by this cognitive dissonance, because we have levels of it within our being that our soul aspects have experienced and are still harboring, and also that those experiences are triggered by all of the players in this reality, all other humans around us, and the information we're being fed that mirrors cognitive dissonance all around us? Are we going to keep focus and keep our sights set on the path that we desire to live and become aware that each thought that goes out through sympathy, because sympathy and empathy are very different frequencies. Are you aligning with sympathy? Oh my God, that's so horrible. Bless their heart. I feel so bad for them. That frequency is not necessarily assisting. That is snowballing the grief process. Yes, it does show that you have some level of compassion and care in your being, though it is still an activation where you're aligning your energy with the pain. In some form, you're matching the trauma body, you're matching the shadow body, as opposed to the experience of empathy, where you are aware and allowing all of this to happen. You are accepting that this experience in a certain perspective, and for this individual and that person in this situation and that animal, is tragic and it is painful in their reality. And you honor that that is their reality, though at the same time you are able to hold your compassion in a frequency where you keep your light quotient and your baseline frequency elevated enough, because you are acutely aware that the energy that we are emanating out is imperative on how we want to keep our frequency to assist, as opposed to become detrimental and falling into the victim consciousness. There is a huge difference. This is taking responsibility for your energetics. Now, we also have to often hold the grief aspects in ourselves that get activated. We also have an opportunity to become aware, to view and perceive the aspects in ourselves that prefer to indulge gluttonously in cognitive dissonance, because sometimes numbing seems much more appealing than seeing the pain and the truth and taking responsibility and rising up and moving into action on whatever level this might be. Though ultimately, we are responsible for all of it. We have opted in to this collective paradigm. We are a soul grouping upon this earth body. She is alive, and she is speaking to us. She is expressing through her body, and we are expressing to her and to each other. Everything is connected. So it is high time for us to realize that every feeling and emotion and thought that we offer out, everything that we say, is forward trajectory. It creates momentum. And once it leaves our energy, it still has our signature, regardless of which way it's choosing to be spun, how it's going to be grabbed and run with. It's still our energy signature, even once it goes outside of our control. This is important. This is how you're feeding into and creating the collective reality along with your personal timeline. We are in a space right now where we are anchoring a very important timeline, both on a personal level and a collective level. This timeline on a majority scale is going to play out for several years to come. Are you clearing your karma? Are you being impeccable with your words? Let's go back to the 4 agreements. Are you taking things personally, even if it's a catastrophic mass event? Are you playing into that frequency? Are you assuming that things are happening as opposed to taking the facts and allowing it to be objective and neutral space that you observe? It is really important for us to understand that even if we don't have these specific masteries in play, they are all affecting us. It absolutely matters what it is that you do, how you feel, what you think. It matters that you choose to be numb. It matters that you're angry or upset or your heart is bleeding and broken for the earth. It matters that you're eating preservatives and that we're drinking alcohol and coffee and intaking substances that affect us negatively. It matters that you gossip behind somebody's back. It matters that you know you are creator source. And it is coming to a place now where it matters so much that it is either going to open up a timeline for you that is filled with mass expansion, opportunities, inviting in your soul tribe, and experiencing Earth and humanity in a way that you have always hoped you could have. Or you're going to be ramming your head up against a wall because the timeline that you're creating is one of cognitive dissonance and opting out of taking responsibility, so it's going to keep showing itself to you. This is also happening on a global scale. We have chosen to put the hierarchy into play. We have chosen to sit back and let it happen. We are not coming together as a mass global community to step up and command power. We're simply not doing it on a mass global scale. That is our responsibility to accept. And even though many of us are working so diligently in an infinite myriad of ways to assist and offer love and light, and we're waking up in mass hordes at this time, we're bringing in more light quotient and we're expanding. Because of that, it will become very obvious on a much more grand scale that we're simply not choosing in a big enough way, in an influential enough way, to come together as a soul group and make a difference. This is so important. So please be aware of the timeline that you're playing into. You might vacillate in and out of these timelines all day long. It could be that you're simply observing the news or the social media, or you're absorbing the victim consciousness that somebody is spatting onto you through their experience. That matters. The energy exchanges matter. So please keep focus on the timeline that you prefer to live and offer your pillar of light, your column of energy, as a way to transmute the grief, to transmute the cognitive dissonance, to transmute the deceit, the deception, the illusions. The energy must be run and cleared. We can do this energetically, and we also do this with practical application and taking responsibility in everyday ways to create the experience that we desire. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to reading your comments below. Take care. Bye-bye.